101.1 on your FM radio dial, worldwide on the internet, kfugradio.org. And yes, Todd, we would love to listen to that, but we can't do it right now. I'm Mike Thornton. This is Public Process, 5 minutes past the top of the hour. That hour is noon on the north coast of the North Coast. Who knows what it is where you are, wherever in the world you may be listening to KFUG. I am very pleased to have Crescent City City Manager Eric Wier joining us on Public Process today. Eric, thank you for being with us.
All right, Michael, thank you for having me.
And let me get you to just come up a little bit closer to that mic so we can hear everything that you have to say today.
All right, is that better?
It's better. We'll work it out. So, Eric, the format that we do for these interviews is to find out a little bit about who you are, because we're going to talk about what you do, but we want to know who you are too, and why you're motivated to be involved in this kind of work. So if somebody says, "Who's Eric Wier?" what do you say?
Well, it's one of those stories that's definitely homegrown. Right here in Crescent City. I was born and raised here. My family's been here for several generations. So went to the local schools. Grew up right in downtown. My family owned and operated the local mortuary. So in fact, my grandfather built that in 1947, and his dad worked for the Hobbswall Mill Company before that. So I grew up right there in the house, actually right next door to the mortuary, so right in downtown, and went to school at Joe Hamilton, and then Crescent Elk Middle School, and then Delaware High School. So definitely born and raised, and have a lot of roots here. So then my travels took me to Southern Oregon University, where I attended and received a degree in physics, and then transferred to Oregon State University, where I picked up my degree in civil engineering, and then worked a couple years in Portland. And then had the opportunity to come back home and work for the city of Crescent City in their engineering department, and that's where my wife and I met my wife at Southern Oregon, but we made the decision, to come back here and raise our family.
So I one of the questions, and I don't know why, I just keep thinking about the show 6 Feet Under. So you didn't go into the family business. Why is that?
It was always one of those things that I was very fortunate to have the parents, that I do have, and to have, their support in whatever endeavors and whatever life's road sort of took me down. And so for me, it was going to college, and then my interest took me into the engineering field with math and science, and so that's the direction it went. The family business was one of those things that I thought about, but my career path took me a different direction. Now, just speaking of that, I do have a lot of admiration for my parents and my grandparents, and now with Joseph Sidorsky and his wife, and the type of business that they run. That business has got to be the hardest business to be in. You're always dealing with somebody that is going through one of the hardest times that they can possibly go through, and that's every day. And to show the type of compassion and caringness, that my parents did for years now, Joseph and his wife, it's really truly amazing. And from my perspective, I know I'm a little bit biased, at least when it comes to my parents, but I think we're pretty fortunate to have the people we do doing that particular business.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, I think you bring up a really important point, because we really are talking about surviving family members who are, they're dealing with the death of a loved one, and very often they are at their lowest moment in their lives. And so it's not just about providing a service, it's more than that.
Well, it's much more than that, right. And from my father's perspective, especially, it's not even so much about dealing with the actual the person that has passed away.
Right.
It's really about dealing with that family,
right,
and making sure that experience is as smooth as possible, and that they feel that their family is being taken care of in that difficult time. So,
and how does that perspective, that way of being and going about doing one's job, how does that impact what you do? Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
Yeah, no, I think I understand kind of where you're going with it, and it's obviously it's hard probably from my perspective because it was just part of life,
Right?
That's how you handled your job, and your job was more than a job, and that's how I view my current job now. It's a 9, it's not your 8 to 5 job.
Right.
It's much more than that, but even so, it's more than a job. It is truly a responsibility, in order to take a position like this in our community, because there's so much need, there's so many opportunities that we can take advantage of.
We're going to talk a lot about that. We're talking with Crescent City City Manager Eric Wier. You are tuned to KFUG Community Radio, and this is Public Process. I'm your host, Mike Thornton. So, Eric, I guess what I'm thinking about is, so I engineering, physics, all of that stuff, and then this turn into city management, which maybe there's more in common than I would think, but I think it's kind of different, isn't it?
Yeah, to say the least, as I was going through college and sitting through some of the math classes and the structural analysis classes and civil engineering, I didn't think that I would be dealing with some of the problems, that come across my desk,
right?
Now, such as homelessness and even the pool and pool programming, different things like that. But in our community, the civil engineering aspect of it is a true asset because of, a lot of what cities do is provide the infrastructure. And so when you talk about sewer and you talk about water and the treatment of those key processes, as well as streets and roads, there's a nice strength to be able to rely on when you talk about that aspect of it.
Well, because when the engineers and the engineering consultants are actually blah blah blah, and you actually know what they're talking about, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then not only that, but then coming up through the engineering department with the city of Crescent City. Right. So now I have the institutional knowledge too.
Right.
To go along with it. So it's a benefit.
So Eric, for people who don't know what a city manager does, talk about that, if you will, because what does a city manager do?
So the city manager is the top administrator for a city, and different cities have different services that they offer. The city of Crescent City is what they call a full service city. And so we offer, like we spoke briefly about, we offer the sewer side of things through the wastewater treatment plant and sewer collections to all of our residents. We offer water to all of the people within Crescent City and the unincorporated areas around. So that's about 15,000 people that we offer water to. We offer police service. We offer fire service. The city of Crescent City even has a housing authority, and that's for the entire county. So that's $3.5 million that come in on an annual basis just to operate the housing authority and provide that assistance. We operate a swimming pool, and then you have all of the home office, so to speak, or the administration that goes along with providing all those services. So it's your finance department, and it's the water, utility billing, and all those sort of things. So the city manager is really the top administrator for each of those things. So as different problems arise or there's different decisions that need to be made, it all comes up to the city manager, and then the city manager is really that focal point that then it goes to the city council.
Well, and I want to talk about that because, in some ways, the buck stops on your desk from all of these different things that are happening that most people in the city interact with. So you have all of that coming up and the buck landing on your desk. Then you have these elected officials and their buck lands on your desk too. And I've worked for local government. I kind of understand how it works. And I also understand that there are limited areas that you can speak about, but I can speak about some of them. And so you're sort of like kind of in the middle here on a lot of things, right?
Yeah, well, and if you look at, they call it the city manager form of government, that's exactly what it is. It's that pinch point, so to speak, between the organization and then you have, the council above that, but even more importantly, it's the community. and trying to meet the community's needs and be able to facilitate policy action, which the council needs to take, and approving budgets and whatnot to really meet the community needs. And then the organization and the resources that we have and our attitude towards trying to get those things done.
Well, talk, if you will, about that facilitating policy, because I think that's another thing that most people really don't understand. And I'm not going to pretend to say that I understand it all, but here's what I think. I think that people get elected to office. Those people come from a variety of different backgrounds and perspectives. And then you actually have to do the job, and somebody's got to help make sense out of that. And that's kind of like your gig and your staff's gig, right?
That is a very good way to summarize the position. And and hats off to the people that we have on the city council right now, and really anybody that throws their hat in the ring to be a city council person or board of supervisors, harbor district, you name it. It's definitely not one of those positions that you get a lot of the credit for, but you do take a lot of blame. And so to be in that position can be a really tough spot, but it's so vital for our community. So a little plug for anybody that's even thinking about running in the future, definitely come find out more about it and be part of the process. In fact, we have some vacancies on our planning commission right now. So if you are in the city limits and interested in government, the planning commission is a great first step.
Well, and most people don't understand how important planning commission actually is. Can you talk more about that?
Sure. So the Planning Commission is a separate board from the City Council, and a lot of the planning, zoning sort of policies or even variances go through the Planning Commission. When we're looking at setting policies that can affect properties, different things like that, a lot of times the Planning Commission will be the ones that hear about it first, and they make their recommendation to maybe an ordinance that's going to go before the council. Planning Commission's also heavily involved in architectural reviews for projects, as well as like the Beachfront Park Master Plan. All that would run through the Planning Commission. So they get that first look at some of the development that's going to happen in our community.
Now, in many communities, planning commissioners are often appointed by the elected officials. Is that not the case here?
That's not the case in the city.
I
believe it is the case in the county. So basically there's an application process, and then we vet it basically by staff.
And I would say, and this is me talking, this isn't Eric talking, that planning commission can and has been in many communities a real stepping stone to running for elected office, whether it be city or county or something else, but primarily city or county. It's very often a stepping stone for someone who's interested in pursuing elected office.
Oh, exactly. And that's been the case for the city as well. If you look back at past council members, even, Mayor Blake Enscore started off in the Planning Commission. You had Darren Short, who just left office. He was on the Planning Commission. Ron Gastineau, Rich and Nia, the list goes on and on. So it really is a great place to start. And
you have a great depth and knowledge of history of this community because you know all these people.
But yes, and it's and it definitely is a small town, and so you get to know them on the sort of the private side, as well as then coming through and understanding the history, and that's been a resource for me as I've taken this office.
We're speaking with Eric Wier, Crescent City City Manager. 18 minutes past the top of the hour. You are tuned to KFUG, Crescent City, 101.1 on your FM radio dial, worldwide on the internet, kfugradio.org. This is Public Process. I'm your host, Mike Thornton. Eric, so can you talk a little bit about the small town aspect of this? Because in bigger cities, you may never run into your city manager in the grocery store or at the restaurant. That's not the case here. Talk about that, if you will, how that impacts your job in your life, if you will.
Well, it definitely, it is a small town, and a lot of times you refer to it as, as that fishbowl, to where, everybody is sort of looking in and kind of seeing what's going on. That's just part of it here, and it has its pros and it has its cons. People care, And so with that comes the ability for people to understand other things that are going on, not just the one issue. And also they really sort of, when they see you in those places, they realize it's a small town. They might talk to you for a little bit and then understand when you say, hey, can we talk about this, a little bit later in the office. But it is, I view it more as a plus and a true benefit to this community that we are so small and that everybody does care so much.
Well, and in part, and I'm really glad to hear that, because I mean, I do know people really care and people can get really passionate about the things that they care about. And I also kind of go, oh my God, the poor guy's trying to have dinner with his wife and his kids or something, and so my guess is that there's probably some of that, but hopefully it sounds like not that much.
Yeah, it's there's always going to be some of that, and so as you see people in the grocery store, like you said, maybe at a restaurant, they might be able to speak to you about something. But a lot of times, in-depth conversations, we can have those at a later date, and people respect that. I don't mind it. I mean, if there's something bothering you, and we don't know about it, then we need to know. And so, take a few minutes, come talk to me, not a problem. Yeah,
one of the things, and I say this when you're not around, I mean, I've really been impressed by your openness and willingness to really listen and hear what people have to say. I mean, I've been in a position where I've had conversations with you about things, and so I say that when you're not around too. I've really been impressed with your willingness and ability to do that. We're speaking with Eric Wier, Crescent City City Manager. So Eric, we are going to get talking about some of the issues that you're dealing with and the city is dealing with, but I do want to go back to something else. So you're doing your job. You have all of this stuff coming from the grassroots up. You have this stuff from the electeds coming down. And then there are things like elections. And then all of a sudden you have new people who are coming in and sitting in these seats who don't necessarily have the same kind of history or connection or knowledge. So what's that like? I guess basically helping to school your supervisors up.
Well, a lot of it is just, sitting down, getting to know them, figuring out really, what interested them in running for office. And then once you kind of have an understanding of where they're at, where their knowledge is, then we have just like any sort of job, you have an orientation book. And so we sit down with that book and we go through the council policies and run through the budget and exactly how it works and what they can expect at meetings and how the process works, how to get things on the agenda. That really just trying to inform them of what's in store for them over the next 4 years, because a lot of times they might not have that experience of coming from the Planning Commission. So this is completely new. They ran for office basically because they just wanted to make a difference.
Right.
And we just have to support them in that. And part of that is providing the information they need to be able to do it.
Yeah, well, I think there's a certain amount of managing up involved in all of that. It's like, and once again, this is me talking. This isn't Eric talking. It's sort of like, well, I'm here. Great. You have absolutely no idea how to do any of this, but you're here. And so now we're going to help you learn how to do it.
Well, and it's just a matter of harnessing that energy, understanding, the strength and the power that energy can have, and then focusing it in the right direction so they can actually accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. So that's really what our job is.
Right. So talk, if you will, about managing staff and the relationship that you have, because I guess, and I haven't delved deeply into, the city structure, but I'm assuming you have, like department heads and then you also have the chief of police and those kinds of things. So talk, if you will, about your relationship in working with them and in helping them to achieve the goals and tasks that they have before them and before their departments.
So I just want to say, from a city standpoint right now, we have an absolutely fabulous staff. I mean, the department heads that we have are truly amazing. They're dedicated. They share the same vision, it's almost like an internal drive is the only way I can really describe it. And so it's it makes my job really that much easier, because you don't have to try to motivate them. They're so motivated and driven themselves, and we share that same common goal. It's just a matter of trying to get them the right resources so that they can do it. Department heads, our chief of police, Ivan Menzel, has done a great job within the police department, really creating that atmosphere of community policing is what he calls it. And again, it's that communication. It's building those relationships, which then help you really get through any of those situations that you might have. Bill Gillespie, the interim fire chief right now, another huge component of our city, trying to organize and keep motivated the volunteer fire department. I mean, my goodness, what a resource the volunteer fire department is for our community.
And volunteer fire departments, those people who really know, understand, but particularly people who are not in rural areas like this, do not understand the vital role that volunteer fire departments play, and the willingness of these people to put themselves in danger in order to protect the community.
Oh yeah, and I can kind of speak to this one. Growing up, my dad was on the volunteer fire department for years, and so as a kid, I can remember hearing the actual siren that used to be on top of the Crescent City Fire Department before they actually had tone outs of radios. You could hear this siren go, and then I can still remember hearing the footsteps as you ran out the door to go. And that's what we have even still to this day, is you have that going on in people's homes where all of a sudden there's that cry for help, and you have these volunteers that are rushing out. From a community side, you can't say enough about those people and what they bring to a community. If you just look at the dollars and cents of it,
right?
Oh my goodness! From a city standpoint alone, you have Crescent City Fire and Rescue is what it's made up of now, and that is a combination of what used to be the city fire department and what used to be the Crescent Fire Protection District. They've now combined to better meet the needs of the community. But if you look at their call volume, it's similar to other agencies that have a budget of $3 or $4 million per year, and ours is somewhere around 700-800 combined.
Right, and I'm assuming that a big part of that is because of the Highway 101 corridor, right?
Well, as far as the call volume itself,
yes.
That makes up some, but just the community in general. So you have, the Highway 101 corridor with the vehicle accidents. Then you obviously have any sort of structure fires or fires in general. And then you have the medical aid side. The medical aid side is a huge resource, and a lot of people probably don't realize it unless they've experienced it, where you make that phone call, and a lot of times, it's that joint response between the Crescent City Fire and Rescue or some of the other rural fire departments as well, and Delaware Ambulance.
Why such a high call volume?
Just it's just sort of the way that things are now, with a lot of the medical calls that come in, and the difficulty breathings and those type of calls. There's about 1,600 calls a year that the fire department runs.
Is it because I want to say this the way I mean it? Is it because of an elderly population or an elderly population combined with high rates of poverty? Does that make sense, what I'm saying? A lot of your calls can be attributed to that demographic, but there's also and it seems like it's just in every community. If you look at our population numbers, we're really similar call volume wise to most communities. Okay. Yeah, I mean, just because of the way you said it made me think that we were talking about something that was higher than what we might expect, but it sounds like that's really not the case.
It's not for our population. I think our numbers are real similar to Fortuna's, a little bit less than Arcata's. And if you look at the total population served by the Crescent City Fire and Rescue, which is, again, not just the city, but also that unincorporated area, it's real similar. Got it.
We're talking with Eric Wier, Crescent City City Manager, 29 minutes past the top of the hour. You are tuned to KFUG. So Eric, I'm going to ask you this. I think I know enough about you that you're going to downplay it. But you talked about this sort of unified approach to doing good local government, right? Okay. Isn't part of your job to help set that vision and to help make sure that actually takes place?
Well, so I've worked for the city of Crescent City for over 15 years now.
Right.
During that time, we've had, I want to say 10 different city managers or interim city managers during that time. So I have witnessed a lot of the different attributes that city managers can bring. I definitely try to make that a focus, that we are in this together, that this is the direction that we want to go, and try to really empower the department heads to make a difference.
I want to just go back to Chief Mensel. Chief Mensel was actually one of the first guests that we had on this program, and he is doing, in my opinion, an incredibly good job. And I particularly respect his vocal stance on equal application of the law within the Crescent City city limits, regardless of socioeconomic status. I mean, he seems to be a very high quality individual with a very clear standard of ethics and values. I have no idea how he got hired to be the chief of police, but as far as I can tell, it was a gosh darn good hire.
Yeah, I would definitely reiterate all those things you just said. Chief Mensel does an excellent job. The situations that he comes in contact with, a lot of times they're fraught with opportunities for the whole situation to go awry.
Oh yes, yeah.
And he does a great job of being able to communicate, being able to understand, not only from his side of the world, but also trying to understand where the other side is coming from, and being able to communicate, and a lot of times comes to a common ground with those types of situations. And then there's and then you have the other side of the calls, which are that true criminal case, and he goes in there and just takes care of business, and it's impressive.
Well, and that sort of gets back to something I think that we started some of this conversation off with, and that is that in the end, we're talking about people in people's lives. I mean, people live in Crescent City. It is their home. So when we're talking about sewer or police or streets or whatever it may be, we're actually talking about the fabric of people's lives, and that makes it very different sometimes in physics, I guess. And then at the same time can make things very complicated, because human beings are complicated.
Well, exactly, and a lot of the issues that we deal with too are very complicated, and so you put those two pieces together, and it does. Situations that maybe shouldn't be as difficult become more difficult, or situations that are very difficult become very much something you can deal with. And it's all about communication, and it's all about starting off with that open and honest mindset, where you're assuming best intentions basically, and then you can work through those problems through building relationships. I think that's absolutely key. Relationships
is something that keeps coming up today on Public Process. Geneva Wiki was talking about it. You've mentioned it a couple of times. One of the things that I've often talked, I've had several positions over my life doing different things, and one of the things that I've often talked about, particularly with government officials, is transparency and building relationships, because most people don't understand how difficult it is, the work that you're trying to do. And so by letting folks know what the legitimate challenges are and all of that, and then working to build those relationships, can really help to take some of the emotion out of things, and then also help uncomplicate things, and help people to be more willing to work together to actually achieve lasting solutions.
No, I completely agree, and it's something that we talk about as a management team. Is there's such thing as emotional intelligence. You hear a lot about IQ, and they call this EQ.
Right.
And it is. It's so important. It's so important just to understand where somebody else is maybe at, or their personality type, or their communication style. Especially with the world that we live in now, where you don't get that face to face so often. Sometimes it might be an email, or a text, and you don't get that sense of context. And so it's really building those relationships so you have that sense of context to go along with the communication style.
And I know politics isn't your position in all of this. You're like trying to actually make a city run, with a lot of help. I mean, right? But does the highly charged political nature of our society and to some degree our community, does that affect the ability to run the city from a perspective of a manager? Do you understand what I'm getting at?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
And, without a doubt, you have to understand it, because it does have so much of an impact. Perception is a lot of times reality.
Right.
And so you have to understand where people are coming from and be able to anticipate some of those things as you move into these meetings or as you're trying to have a discussion. Because in the end, a lot of the things that really allow us to make the difference are the policy decisions. And so we have to be able to take both sides of the argument, get the information out there so that they can make the informed decision. So without a doubt, it definitely has an impact.
Well, because it's one of the things, and and I'll admit I've been guilty of it myself. Is it so quickly gets from I disagree with what your stance is to it's evil, it's corrupt, it's you know what I mean? Like people just go from like 0 to 60, or 0 to 160 before even letting somebody actually say what they're trying to say.
No, I've seen it, and it's taken a few meetings that should have went one direction, and then you walk away and you don't accomplish anything. And so that is part of this job, is to make sure you understand some of those things and try to keep it as tightly reined in as you can, while still getting the message out and still allowing all those different conversations to happen.
Yeah, and all those voices to be heard.
Exactly.
We're speaking with Eric Wier, Crescent City City Manager. This is Public Process. I'm Mike Thornton, KFUG Community Radio, your community radio station. So, Eric, let's talk about some of the challenges and opportunities. Let's put it that way, that the city is facing. We had a lot of talk about the pool. There's a meeting about that tonight, right?
There is, and I do appreciate that. I mean, around our organization, we talk about opportunities a lot. Unfortunately, sometimes opportunities disguise themselves in the form of a lot of hard work more often than not.
I bet.
But nonetheless, they're out there.
Right.
And I will say this, we talk about our staff, the department heads, really all the way through. You have a group of people that is really committed to taking full advantage of those opportunities. And the pool's one of them. What a great asset this is for our community. So tonight we're going to be discussing the pool's master plan. That starts at 4 o'clock at the wastewater treatment plant. We've hired a sort of a nationally renowned aquatic consultant company, Councilman Huntsaker, and they'll be here to present the plan. So with this, we've had a lot of community input, and we went the traditional route, which is you start with the consultant. He works with staff. He sort of understands basically the facility he's working with, and then he goes and he advertises, or we advertise some public meetings. People that are interested in the pool, they come to those public meetings, they get their input out, and it's your typical process, which is fine, and there's good information that's obtained from it. But then in this route, we're able to partner, and partnering is so huge for us. And so we partnered with Geneva Wiki, and through the California Endowment, we're able to secure a grant to do empathy interviews. And the empathy interviews, it was much more than just the pool master plan for us with the empathy interviews. It was really understanding this process of empathy and a different way to engage and communicate with the community. The insights that were derived out of that were tremendously valuable to the study. They're in the study. But even more than that, we were able to get a better pulse on the community, and I think the community was able to get maybe a better pulse on this city and the people working for it right now. The staff that went through it took an emotional toll. I mean, they were invested in it, and I think deeply moved by the whole process.
Well, when you find out what the actual lived experience of people is, it's very personal, and it can be very emotional. And as I was speaking when Geneva was talking about this when she was on before you, my experience has been that usually government is sort of the last kind of entity to adopt these kinds of techniques and strategies for public engagement. And it is so gratifying to hear that the city is doing that because it changes everything. It's a totally different way of doing engagement than what traditionally happens. We're going to do an online survey. We're going to have a town hall meeting. We're going to have a meeting in the middle of the day when like very few people can actually come there. It's a very different thing.
No, I do agree. I mean, and those processes are fine, and you do get some information.
Oh yeah, right.
But the information that was gained with this goes much more than beyond a pool master plan. It really gets down to what the pool is for this community, and that's what was communicated loud and clear by people that don't use the pool, people that maybe stopped using the pool years ago. Everybody pretty much in unison communicated to us, this is a community asset that we value as a community and that we want to keep.
We're speaking with Crescent City City Manager Eric Wier. You are tuned to KFUG, Crescent City. So, Eric, another issue that has been very big and that there is another big meeting coming up this week is related to homelessness. Talk, if you will, about that, where things stand, the city's role in that, and the city's participation in this upcoming town hall meeting that's taking place on Thursday, I believe, at Joe Hamilton, correct?
Correct. I think it's Thursday, 6 o'clock at Joe Hamilton.
Yeah, I think so too.
It's Senator McGuire's town hall, so he's the driving force behind it, but it's definitely in partnership with the county and the city coming together to really look at homelessness in our community, talk about the efforts that are happening currently with the county and city, as well as what's going to happen short term, so about the next 12 months, and then the longer term, which would be like your 12 months to 36 months, or the next 2 to 3 years.
No, go ahead.
So it'll be a very good meeting. I'm excited to have Senator McGuire in town. Homelessness is an epidemic that is it's obviously it's not just Crescent City. Every city is struggling with this, and it's really going to absolutely take everyone to come to a solution to it. And I don't know if we're ever going to end homelessness, but there's a lot that we can put in place to offer resources and solutions from where we're at now. And
a number of communities, they say end homelessness, but what they really mean is something that's really referred to as functional zero, which means, are there people who are in the community who are homeless? Yes, but they are homeless for much shorter periods of time. There are actual paths and avenues for them to get out of homelessness in some sort of reasonable time frame. So, there's a lot of different ways to look at that. And I want to say, and I've had an opportunity to talk with a couple of people about this, and I was really gratified to read the op-ed in the Triplicate on Saturday, and particularly the one part and where the statement was, we've come to the conclusion that the cost of doing nothing far outweighs the cost of attempting to address the situation in meaningful ways. I cannot tell you how gratified I was to read that on that joint press release that came from the senator and from the county and from the city.
Yeah, and it truly is a partnership. I think all agencies firmly believe that. And now once you start to include, the state and the federal government, some of those resources are now coming to us. So if we can put those funds in the right places, now we are talking about real solutions. And it's definitely with homelessness, it's not a one size fits all. There's so many different facets, and it comes back to the empathy sort of interviews that we were talking about. When you talk about homeless, there are people that are, you have the chronically homeless, severely mentally ill sort of segment of it that need a whole different set of resources and solutions than maybe somebody that just say lost a job and would happen to be living paycheck to paycheck, and now all of a sudden they don't have that paycheck for 1 month, and now they find themselves in this situation. So I think understanding that broad spectrum and trying to be able to provide resources in each of those different areas is going to be key.
Yeah, and seeing that, and seeing the partnership of the governing entities coming together to address this is just really great, and really I think a real opportunity for moving forward. It causes me to think of two things. One is a question, one is a statement that I'm going to make. You're not making it, I'm making it. But the question first is, to what degree have the people, we talked a lot about empathy interviews, to what degree are the people closest to the pain going to be involved or are involved in helping to craft these solutions? Because I think if we don't do that, we could wind up doing a lot of stuff that doesn't help as much as we'd like it to.
Exactly. And the county through Health and Human Services, they're going to be taking the lead role on this. And I think you're exactly right. I think you have to engage the people that need the services. It's just the same thing with the pool. You get out there, you talk to people, you find out what it means personally to them, and then that'll allow you to find those pathways to really understand what is needed.
And then the statement, which really doesn't apply so much to the city and really applies more to the county, particularly one supervisor on the county board of supervisors, that getting to actually seeing this as a multifaceted problem that involves human beings who have different needs, as compared to stereotyping, demonizing, and then engaging in divisive political grandstanding that does nothing but turn the community against itself. I'm really, really glad to see that other elected officials and other appointed officials from a variety of perspectives are not doing that and are moving forward to actually try to come up with some real solutions.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. And I think that's also reiterated with our police department, Chief Ivan Menzel, the officers. It's getting down to finding out what is going on with those individuals and addressing them on a case-by-case basis. With Chief Menzel, too, he's very committed to upholding the law and making sure that everyone's rights are not violated, no matter what your status happens to be. And so that's hats off to him in dealing with some of those problems that are out on the forefront, and just all natures of this, as well as then the overarching effort, which is to address that full gamut of this problem that is homelessness.
And let's be clear, it's hard. It's challenging, hard work, and I'm saying that from the perspectives of somebody who has worked for local government. I mean, it's really easy sometimes to kind of, and once again, this is me talking, this isn't Eric talking. It's really easy to go, you fix it. And it's like, well, okay. But it's really hard, challenging stuff. There's no easy answers to any of this. If it was easy, it would have already been taken care of. And just the fact of bringing this together with a serious effort and commitment to genuinely try to do something is incredibly important, and sets the stage, I think, for other similar types of activities in other areas of challenge for our community.
Well, exactly. And that's what it's going to take. It's going to take that partnership and especially in our community, where you have the county and through Health and Human Services, they have a lot of those resources that can be offered. I think a lot of the money is going to end up going to them. And then the collaboration and partnership with the city and us being able to support those things, being able to understand those things, as well as our housing authority. Our housing authority provides a vital service and is key in this whole situation. Especially, there's a movement now where it's housing first is really some of the thought process
right.
in regarding homeless. It's taking those people that are just, say, newly homeless or just in that bad situation, making sure that they get out of that soon so that they can resume their lives and don't end up as a person that ends up chronically homeless.
Well, and I mean, and we're spending a lot of time on it. It's, as Eric knows and other people know, it's something I'm very interested in, and we are spending a lot of time on it. But it's, in the end, it's cheaper. It's cheaper, a lot cheaper to address it as compared to trying to deal with it through law enforcement all the time or emergency room visits all the time or all of that kinds of things. So it makes financial sense in addition to everything else.
Exactly. So definitely come out Thursday night, Joe Hamilton, 6 o'clock. There'll be a great discussion on all the things that are happening in regard to that. We're
speaking with Eric Wier, Crescent City City Manager. So Eric, another topic, at least on my mind, is economic development for the city, which I think seems to be improving. I think, is it? But I would imagine it's still a challenge.
It is still a challenge, but again, we prefer to look at it as opportunities, and we have a lot of opportunities still in this community for economic growth. The Economic Summit, I was able to attend that and even participate on a panel with Jay Serena, the county CIO, as well as Charlie Helms, the harbor master. And it is very positive right now. There's a lot of people that are excited about this community, excited about what's going on in the community, seeing this as that opportunity that it really is. And with the city, we're trying to address those opportunities and really make sure that our organization meets those community needs. So we're going through a reorganization right now. We've had several key positions that have retired from the city. So our community development director, Eric Taylor, recently retired, as well as Matt Hildebrandt, the pool manager, is retiring. And then we lost our utility manager. He retired as well. And so when you have those transitions, now is the time to look at the organization, restructure if needed, if you think that there's a way that we can better meet the community needs. And so we're going to restructure our community development department and streamline the development process, really focused on customer service. We're also going to be hiring a recreation director / events director. So this person would be in charge of the city's RV park, the pool, the cultural center, all the parks, really with a focus on putting on those events. So as we have those events, that'll draw people into the community. It gives them something to do, working in hand with the chamber, and then you'll start to see things grow. And I think we've seen it with some of the businesses, such as Seaquake. Seaquake's a huge success, and it's just a matter of if you build it correctly, it can thrive here.
Well, and I'm really glad you used the word thrive, and this is a bigger conversation, which I hope at some point you can come back and we can talk more about, because it's one of the things, and Paul Kritz and I and others have talked about this, that when it comes to development, that perhaps a good premise is to say, what are the components of a thriving community and how can economic development support that, as compared to just simply saying, boy, if we get more businesses in here, that'll fix everything. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a broader, kind of more nuanced discussion that we don't have time for today, but I would love to have that discussion with you. So Eric, any other issues in particular that you want to bring up as we're working our way out of this hour of public process today?
The big things I think we hit on, where we're going through some of these master plans to really make sure that we're putting ourselves in the position that we need to be in as a city. You have the term success, and success is, I think it might have been Bobby Younger. Anyway, there was somebody that had the famous quote that basically said, success does not just happen, but instead it is the derivative of preparedness and opportunity. And so, as those opportunities come, which it definitely seems like we're in that time that opportunities are coming, we just need to make sure that we're doing the preparedness that we need to.
Yeah, and a lot of hard work.
And like you say, opportunities sometimes do disguise themselves in hard work.
Yeah, they certainly do. So we've been talking with Crescent City City Manager Eric Wier on public process today. So Eric, the first thing I want to do is thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. I look forward to having you on again in the future, because all of these things will continue to go on and there will be new opportunities and new challenges. Any final thoughts that you have for our audience today?
Now, Mike, I just want to thank you for the time and just let everybody know that's out there that there's a lot of exciting things that are going to be happening in our community, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Great, and we're really glad that you're with us today. And I will say I'm very happy that you are Crescent City's city manager. I think, as with the police chief, I think that they made a good hire.
I appreciate that.
All righty. Crescent City City Manager Eric Wier, thank you for being with us on Public Process today. All right, well, there we go. We made it through another show, and we'll be back again, of course, next week with more. And we are going to have Del North's solid waste manager, Ted Ward, on. And I'm hoping that Ted Ward is going to help us learn how to make a quantum time machine out of pizza boxes. And if you listen to the show, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, Ted is like the Neil deGrasse Tyson of recycling, He's like the Stephen Hawking of recycling. So it's going to be a cool show. I hope you'll stay tuned, and I hope you'll stay tuned to KFUG for the rest of the day, the rest of the week, the rest of the month, the rest of the year, and the rest of your life.